I had a detached retina. And my voice, it's coming back.
In 1984, he was the highest-paid actor on American television, soaring through the skies in a supersonic helicopter and captivating millions of viewers week after week. With the looks of a movie star, the talent to match, and Hollywood seemingly at his feet, MichaelVincent stood at the very peak of fame. But then the cameras stopped rolling, the spotlight faded, and the world slowly watched as one of the brightest stars of the 1970s and 1980s slipped into darkness. What really happened to this all-American golden boy? MichaelVincent was born on July 15, 1944, in Denver, Colorado, while his father, Lloyd Vincent, was stationed there during World War II as a B-25 bomber pilot. His mother, Doris Jane, was only 16 years old when she married Lloyd. After the war, the family settled in Hanford, California, in the San Joaquin Valley, where Lloyd left military life behind to work as a sign painter. Together, his parents ran a small sign business. Jan grew up in this modest household alongside his sister, Jacqueline, and his younger brother, Christopher, an ordinary childhood that would one day contrast sharply with the extraordinary rise and tragic fall that lay ahead. The Vincent family had a complicated history. Jan's grandfather, Herbert Vincent, had been involved in bank robberies and counterfeiting during the 1920s and 1930s. One uncle was shot dead by a sheriff, while two others were later convicted of robbing banks. Even Jan's father, Lloyd, battled alcoholism, and young Jan grew up watching him live under strict military command, constantly being told where to go, what to do, and when to do it. Those early experiences planted a deep and lasting distrust of authority that would follow Jan throughout his life. Yet none of that darkness was visible on the surface. MichaelVincent possessed what many described as classic all-American good looks, a strong jawline, blonde hair, striking blue eyes, and a natural physical presence that drew attention wherever he went. He attended Hanford High School, graduating in 1963, before enrolling at Ventura College in Southern California. Following in his father's footsteps, Jan served in the California Army National Guard. But the rigid discipline of military life clashed sharply with his restless, rebellious spirit. By 1967, Vincent was nearing the end of his National Guard service and still unsure of his future. That was when a talent scout noticed him, immediately struck by his appearance. In Southern California, attractive young men were everywhere, but there was something about MichaelVincent that made people stop and look twice. But MichaelVincent had something extra, an intangible quality the camera seemed to fall in love with. His first acting job came that same year in the Mexican-American film The Bandits, where he appeared alongside Robert Conrad. Soon after, he made his formal television debut in The Hardy Boys, The Mystery of the Chinese Junk. Universal Studios quickly took notice, signed him to a contract, and casting agent Dick Clayton began guiding his early career. The late 1960s were about to become a turning point. In 1968, Vincent appeared in Journey to Shiloh, then landed the role of Link in the Danger Island segments of Hanna-Barbera's Saturday morning series The Banana Splits Adventure Hour. It was children's television, not prestige work, but it was steady, visible, and most importantly, it put his face in front of a national audience. His first real breakthrough arrived in 1969 when he was cast in The Undefeated, a Civil War film starring Hollywood legends John Wayne and Rock Hudson. Vincent played Bubba Wilkes, and although it was a supporting role, sharing the screen with John Wayne carried real weight. It opened doors. That same year, he joined the primetime soap The Survivors, acting alongside Lana Turner and George Hamilton. The series was canceled midway through the season, but Vincent had already proven he could stand toe-to-toe with established stars. In 1970, he landed the role that truly announced him as a serious actor. The made-for-television film Tribes, also known as The Soldier Who Declared Peace, told the story of a hippie draft resistor clashing with a hardline Marine drill instructor, played by Darren McGavin, a performance that signaled MichaelVincent's arrival as a talent to watch. Vincent's breakthrough performance revealed something Hollywood hadn't fully seen before: depth. It was subtle, restrained, and authentic, proving he was far more than just a handsome face. Critics took notice, and almost overnight, the industry did too. The 1970s quickly became MichaelVincent's era. In 1971, he starred opposite Robert Mitchum in Going Home, playing Mitchum's troubled son. A year later, he appeared alongside Charles Bronson in the sleek, icy thriller The Mechanic, cast as the young protege to Bronson's ruthless assassin. Matching Bronson's famously intimidating screen presence was no small feat, yet Vincent did exactly that. He worked relentlessly, moving fluidly between film and television. In 1971, he appeared on Gunsmoke, one of America's longest-running and most beloved westerns. Guest roles followed on Lassie and Bonanza, each performance further proving his adaptability across genres and audiences. By 1973, Vincent showed another side of himself in Disney's The World's Greatest Athlete, starring alongside Tim Conway and John Amos. The light-hearted family comedy demonstrated his ease with humor, but it was dramatic material where he truly excelled. In 1974, Buster and Billy cast him as Buster Lane, a romantic, wounded anti-hero in a haunting coming-of-age story set in rural Georgia. The role captured a raw vulnerability that lingered long after the screen faded, hinting at both the brilliance of his talent and the fragility beneath it. Vincent shocked audiences when he appeared in full frontal nudity, an almost unheard-of move for a male lead in a major film at the time. It was daring, provocative, and sent a clear message. He wasn't interested in playing it safe or fitting neatly into Hollywood's traditional leading man mold. The film later gained cult status for its raw, unfiltered look at teenage desire, social class, and emotional vulnerability, further cementing Vincent's reputation as an actor willing to take real risks. In 1975, he headlined White Line Fever as Carol Joe Hummer, a long-haul trucker who takes on corruption within the trucking industry. The film rode the wave of 1970s outlaw trucker culture, and Vincent embodied the blue-collar rebel perfectly, a working-class hero pushing back against a rigged system. That same year, he appeared in Bite the Bullet, an epic endurance horse race drama set in 1908, sharing the screen with Gene Hackman, Candice Bergen, and James Coburn. Directed by Richard Brooks, Bite the Bullet earned strong critical praise and proved Vincent could command attention even among Hollywood heavyweights in a prestige production. In 1976, he took on Vigilante Force, portraying a hired enforcer brought in to restore order to a California oil town, only to become corrupted by power himself. The role allowed Vincent to explore moral gray areas, something he handled with striking ease. That same year, Baby Blue Marine cast him as a World War II Marine training dropout who falsely presents himself as a war hero. Beneath the bravado, Vincent revealed deep insecurity and fragility, showing just how layered his performances had become. By the mid-1970s, MichaelVincent was standing on the edge of true superstardom. Rumors even circulated that Universal considered him for the role of Matt Hooper in Jaws, a part that ultimately went to Richard Dreyfuss after Steven Spielberg made his choice. In hindsight, it feels like one of Hollywood's great what-if moments. Had Vincent landed Jaws, his entire career path might have shifted overnight. Instead, 1977 brought Damnation Alley, a post-apocalyptic adventure that failed to resonate with audiences. A year later came Big Wednesday, John Milius's sweeping, emotional surf epic. Vincent portrayed Matt Johnson, a reckless, self-destructive surfer alongside Gary Busey and William Catt, a role that unknowingly mirrored parts of his own life. Vincent wasn't just acting the part. He was a genuine surfer who had spent years chasing waves around the world. He understood the culture intimately, the freedom, the brotherhood, and the darker pull toward excess and self-destruction. That authenticity gave his performance a raw edge few noticed at the time. In 1978, he also appeared in Hooper with Burt Reynolds, playing a young stuntman. The work never slowed. Studios wanted him. Audiences recognized him. He showed up in commercials, and at one point, a cosmetic surgeon even named him among Hollywood's 10 best noses. By every measure, the future looked secure. Then came 1983 and The Winds of War, the massive television miniseries adapted from Herman Wouk's novel. Vincent played Byron "Briny" Henry, a naval officer in the sprawling World War II saga. The production was a television event, drawing millions of viewers, and Vincent delivered a strong, steady performance that proved he could carry himself in high-prestige television. But quietly, something else was taking shape. A new action series was in development, Airwolf. In 1984, Jan-Michael-Vincent was cast as Stringfellow Hawk. The concept was instantly compelling, a cutting-edge, heavily armed supersonic helicopter stolen from its creators, hidden away by a mysterious pilot who only flies missions he believes are just. Hawk was a Vietnam veteran, a loner haunted by the disappearance of his brother. He lived alone in a remote cabin, piloted the most advanced aircraft in the world, and somehow found solace playing the cello. When Airwolf premiered on CBS in January 1984, it exploded. Audiences were drawn to the sleek black helicopter, the high-stakes missions, and the Cold War intrigue. But just as much, they were drawn to Jan-Michael-Vincent, the quiet intensity behind the controls, finally at the center of a phenomenon that would define his legacy. At 39, Jan-Michael-Vincent still embodied the classic all-American leading man. As Stringfellow Hawk, he was calm, guarded, and quietly formidable, the kind of hero television audiences were drawn to in the mid-1980s. Ernest Borgnine co-starred as Dominic Santini, Hawk's mentor and closest ally, bringing humor and warmth that perfectly offset Vincent's brooding intensity. The show's flexible premise allowed each episode to feel different, giving the producers room to experiment with tone and scale. Some weeks, Hawk and Santini were rescuing hostages. Other times, they were slipping into enemy territory or stopping nuclear catastrophes just moments before disaster. At the center of it all was Airwolf itself, a sleek, black, heavily armed helicopter capable of reaching Mach 1. Its advanced technology and explosive aerial combat delivered a level of spectacle television audiences had rarely experienced. The flight sequences felt real, dangerous, and thrilling in a way few shows could match. What truly elevated Airwolf, though, was Vincent's performance. He gave Stringfellow Hawk emotional depth that often went beyond what was written on the page. Hawk was a classical cellist, an unexpected and almost contradictory trait for an action hero, but Vincent made it feel natural. Living alone in a remote mountain cabin with his dog, Hawk kept the world at a distance, still haunted by the disappearance of his brother, St. John, during the Vietnam War. Vincent played the role with restraint, relying on subtle expressions rather than dialogue. In the quiet moments, the camera would catch the pain in Hawk's eyes, the loneliness, the weight of someone capable of immense violence when necessary, yet deeply wounded inside. Airwolf quickly became one of the biggest shows on television, going head-to-head with Knight Rider, another high-tech action series built around a mysterious hero and a powerful machine. Where Knight Rider leaned on David Hasselhoff's charm and Kit's witty AI personality, Airwolf offered intensity, realism, and authentic aerial action. Both reflected the early 1980s belief that technology could solve almost anything. But Airwolf stood apart, and Vincent rose with it, becoming one of the highest-paid actors in television history. His reported salary reached $200,000 per episode, an astonishing figure in 1984, far beyond what most TV stars earned. He had reached the top tier. Yet behind the scenes, trouble was already taking root. Vincent had battled alcoholism for years, a struggle that echoed his father's own demons. Now, drugs entered the equation. During the filming of Airwolf, Vincent openly admitted he was fighting substance abuse issues. He spoke of seeking help, but controlling those impulses was becoming increasingly difficult. The show ran 3 seasons with him at the center, and while writers tried to gradually soften Hawk's rigid demeanor, the strain was evident. In a 1984 interview, Vincent mentioned how they had finally allowed Hawk to smile on occasion, revealing glimpses of humanity beneath the stoicism. He spoke fondly of the ocean, recalling how he had spent 3 months sailing the Caribbean after finishing The Winds of War. At 40, he was still surfing, still living the life he loved. On the surface, everything looked perfect, but the fractures were widening. After the 3rd season, Vincent left Airwolf. The series limped on for 1 more season with a new cast, a drastically reduced budget, and a move to the USA Network. It never recaptured its former magic. And neither did Jan-Michael-Vincent. Years later, he would reflect quietly on the moment he realized the truth about himself. Remembering something his father once told him when he was 8 years old, and admitting, "I never thought I'd become an addictive personality. But I did." This was the beginning of the long descent. After leaving Airwolf in 1987, MichaelVincent returned to an industry that no longer waited for him. By the late 1980s and early 1990s, his star power had faded, and the roles reflected it. Smaller parts, lower budgets, quieter releases. In 1991, he appeared opposite Tracy Lords in the thriller Raw Nerve. By 1995, he was starring in Ice Cream Man with Clint Howard, a dark comedy horror film that barely registered in theaters and later gained an odd cult following on home video, often viewed as unintentionally humorous. The pattern continued. Each project felt like a step further from the spotlight. Films with titles like Alienator, Hit List, and Enemy Territory filled his resume. Fast, inexpensive action movies designed for the booming direct-to-video market of the 1990s. These were the kinds of tapes stacked high in video rental stores, watched once, then forgotten. For an actor who had once commanded $200,000 per episode on network television, the contrast was stark and unforgiving. But the shrinking roles were only part of the story. Vincent's personal life was unraveling just as quickly. The warning signs had been there for years. In the late 1970s alone, he had been arrested multiple times. 3 separate cocaine possession charges in 1977, 1978, and 1979. In 1984 and 1985, he spent time in jail following barroom brawls. These weren't random lapses in judgment. They formed a clear pattern, symptoms of deeper struggles that were never fully brought under control. His relationships suffered the same fate. Vincent married Bonnie Portman in 1968, and together they had one child, a daughter named Amber, born in 1972. But the marriage was troubled almost from the beginning. The couple separated in 1977, though the divorce wouldn't be finalized until 1986. By then, Vincent had already remarried. His second marriage, to Joanne Robinson in 1986, ended in disaster. In 1998, she left him and secured a restraining order, alleging that Vincent had abused her during their marriage. By the mid-1990s, the fall was no longer subtle. The career that once seemed unstoppable was now reduced to shadows of its former self, and behind the scenes, the personal damage was becoming impossible to ignore. The collapse only deepened. The divorce was finalized in 1999, and by 2000, Vincent's legal troubles had reached a devastating new level. A court ordered him to pay more than $350,000 in a default judgment after he physically assaulted a former girlfriend, an attack that allegedly caused her to miscarry. That same year, he was sentenced to 60 days in jail for violating probation tied to earlier alcohol-related offenses, arrested once again for public intoxication and for assaulting his fiancée. What had once been warning signs were now undeniable consequences. But the turning point that permanently altered everything came earlier, in 1996. Vincent was involved in a near-fatal car crash in Mission Viejo, California. He was driving under the influence. The impact shattered his neck in multiple places and crushed his larynx, inflicting irreversible damage to his vocal cords. His injuries were so severe that doctors initially doubted he would survive. For a man whose career depended on his physical presence and voice, it was catastrophic. When Vincent eventually recovered enough to return to work, nothing was the same. His voice was no longer smooth or commanding, it was rough, broken, and permanently scarred. The confident sound audiences remembered had been replaced by a hoarse, gravelly rasp. In one of the most unsettling moments of his later career, Vincent arrived on set to film Redline in 1996 while still healing from the crash. His face was swollen and marked with scars, and he was reportedly still wearing his hospital identification bracelet. The production went forward regardless. Watching the film today is uncomfortable. What appears on screen feels less like a performance and more like a record of a man struggling simply to stand, speak, and function. Years later, during a 2007 interview, Vincent was asked about the accident that had so clearly changed his life. His response stunned the reporter. He said he had no memory of it at all. When the interviewer described the crash, the broken neck, the crushed larynx, the damage to his voice, Vincent remained blank. Whether the memory loss came from head trauma, long-term substance abuse, or a psychological defense against unbearable pain, entire chapters of his life were simply gone. The damage didn't stop there. In 2002, Vincent was involved in yet another car accident. By then, the cumulative effects of repeated injuries and decades of substance abuse had taken a severe toll on his body. In 2012, he developed a serious leg infection that worsened due to peripheral artery disease. Doctors were left with no choice but to amputate the lower portion of his right leg. Fitted with a prosthetic foot, Vincent often relied on a wheelchair in his later years, a stark and heartbreaking contrast to the athletic, airborne hero who once ruled primetime television. Through the 1990s and into the early 2000s, MichaelVincent continued acting, but only sporadically. He appeared briefly in Buffalo 66 in 1998, Vincent Gallo's critically praised film, and had a small role on Nash Bridges. Most of his work during this period went straight to video, low-budget action films and thrillers that came and went with little notice. His final credited role was in 2002's White Boy, also known as Menace. Not long after, Vincent quietly stepped away from acting altogether. By the early 2000s, he was living far from Hollywood, first in Vicksburg, Mississippi. In June 2000, he married his third wife, Patricia and Christ. Unlike previous relationships marked by chaos and legal trouble, Patricia remained with him through his steep physical and mental decline. Publicly, Vincent all but vanished. When a reporter tracked him down in September 2007, the sight was startling. At 63, Vincent looked decades older. Years of substance abuse and illness had taken a visible toll. His face weathered, his body heavier, his movements slow and fragile. His voice, once confident and commanding, was reduced to a strained rasp. Even more disturbing was his detachment from his own past. When told he had once been bigger than Brad Pitt, Vincent replied that he didn't even know who Brad Pitt was. When reminded he had been one of the highest-paid actors in television history, earning $200,000 per episode, he seemed genuinely surprised. Large portions of his life and career were simply gone from memory. Vincent spent his final years quietly with Patricia, later relocating to North Carolina. His health continued to deteriorate. Having lost part of his leg, he relied heavily on a wheelchair, a tragic contrast to the athletic action star who once performed daring stunts on screen. On February 10, 2019, MichaelVincent died of cardiac arrest at Mission Hospital in Asheville, North Carolina. He was 74. No autopsy was performed, and his death went unreported for weeks, finally revealed by TMZ in March 2019. The delay spoke volumes about how far he had faded from public awareness. So what really happened to MichaelVincent? The simple answer is that he destroyed himself. The deeper truth is more complex. He carried generations of family dysfunction, a hereditary struggle with alcoholism, a lifelong distrust of authority, and inner demons that fame and fortune could never silence. He had everything: talent, looks, opportunity, and success beyond what most actors ever achieve. He worked with legends, starred in a hit series, and reached heights few ever touch. But addiction, violence, and self-destruction followed him relentlessly. Still, his story is not without meaning. In the 1970s, MichaelVincent was genuinely good, sometimes brilliant. Films like The Mechanic, Tribes, and Big Wednesday reveal an actor with real depth and quiet emotional power. He embodied the rebellious, anti-establishment spirit of his era, most memorably as Stringfellow Hawk in Airwolf. The series remains a cult classic, rediscovered by new generations, even parodied in shows like Rick and Morty. The helicopter and the hero endure, even if the troubled man behind them was slowly forgotten. Today, MichaelVincent is mostly remembered by those who grew up with him, the audiences who saw Big Wednesday on the big screen and waited week after week for Airwolf. To many, his story ends with a familiar verdict: wasted potential. And in some ways, that's true. He was given rare opportunities and made choices that cost him dearly. But that judgment alone doesn't tell the whole story. Vincent also left behind performances that still resonate decades later. He created Stringfellow Hawk, a character that became iconic, and for a brief but undeniable moment, he stood at the very top of his profession. His life became a cautionary tale about addiction and self-destruction, about how fame and money can't save someone from their own demons, But it's also the story of a man who rose from a troubled background to remarkable success, only to find himself unable to sustain it. He never mastered the discipline, stability, or sobriety that lasting success demanded. He was survived by his daughter Amber from his first marriage, and by Patricia, his third wife, who stayed with him through his darkest years. When Vincent died far from Hollywood, the spotlight was long gone, but the legacy remained. The action hero, the surfer, the television star, the fallen man in a wheelchair, all of those versions of MichaelVincent were real. And together, they form a story that still lingers, reminding us that fame fades quickly, but the choices we make echo long after.